August 6, 1945, 8:15 hours. Imperial General Headquarters, Tokyo. A single decoded transmission from Hiroshima would shatter 3 years of carefully constructed illusions about industrial warfare. What the Japanese High Command read in that message would force them to confront a truth they had spent the entire war denying. America hadn't been fighting at full capacity. They had been holding back. The basement war room beneath the Imperial Palace sat 90 feet underground, insulated by reinforced concrete walls 4 feet thick. On the morning of August 6, 1945, the space hummed with the familiar rhythm of a losing war. Field Marshal Shinroku Hata's morning intelligence briefing had become a ritual of managed decline. At precisely 0815 hours, Communications Officer Lieutenant Colonel Tishi Yamamoto burst through the steel door without the customary bow. In his hands, he carried a decoded transmission that would fundamentally alter how Japan's military leadership understood the war they had been fighting. The message was fragmentary, transmitted by the Hiroshima Regional Military Command before all communications ceased. Entire city destroyed by single bomb. Blast radius exceeds all previous bombardment. Unknown weapon type. Casualties catastrophic. Request immediate. The transmission ended mid-sentence. General Yoshiro Umezu, Chief of the Imperial General Staff, read the message 3 times. His first assumption was that American B-29s had conducted the largest conventional bombing raid of the war, perhaps 500 aircraft dropping incendiaries simultaneously. The mathematics seemed impossible otherwise. Hiroshima was a city of 350,000 people spread across 27 square miles. But additional reports arriving throughout the morning told a different story. Weather reconnaissance had reported only 3 B-29s over Hiroshima that morning. 3 aircraft, not 300. 3. Admiral Toyoda, Chief of the Naval General Staff, stood at the massive wall map tracking every known American military asset in the Pacific. His intelligence staff had become exceptionally skilled at predicting American operations. They knew bomber formations, typical ordnance loads, and expected damage patterns. Nothing in 3 years of air war suggested 3 aircraft could destroy an entire city. By 10 o'clock hours, reconnaissance flights attempting to reach Hiroshima reported something unprecedented. Pilots described a mushroom-shaped cloud rising over 40,000 feet, visible from 150 miles away. The cloud glowed with colors they had never seen, purples and oranges that seemed to pulse with internal light. Foreign Minister Shigenori Togo received the first eyewitness account at 11:30 hours from a railway official who had been 15 miles outside Hiroshima. The man's testimony, recorded by Togo's secretary, described a flash brighter than 1,000 suns, followed by a pressure wave that knocked trains off their tracks. He reported that the entire city center had simply vanished, replaced by a firestorm visible from the mountains. The afternoon meeting of the Supreme War Council convened at 1,400 hours in complete silence. Prime Minister Kanaro Suzuki, who had survived multiple assassination attempts for even suggesting peace negotiations, read the accumulated reports. His hands trembled slightly as he placed the documents on the table. "Gentlemen," Suzuki began, "we must consider what this means." General Kurachika Anami, the Minister of War and the most ardent advocate for continuing the fight, spoke first. "American propaganda. They want us to believe they possess weapons they do not have. Hiroshima was destroyed by conventional bombing, and they are using deception to 3 aircraft. Admiral Toyoda interrupted something he would never have done in normal circumstances. 3 aircraft on Amin's sun. Our radar tracked them. Our observers watched them. 3. The room fell silent as the implications settled over them like volcanic ash. For 3 years, Japanese military doctrine had been built on a single premise. American industrial might could be overcome by Japanese spiritual strength and tactical innovation. The Americans could produce more ships, more planes, more tanks. But Japanese forces would fight with such ferocity that American casualties would become politically unbearable. This calculation had guided every decision since Pearl Harbor. When American industry produced 300,000 aircraft, Japan's leaders told themselves that Japanese pilots, though outnumbered, would fight with 10 times the spirit. When American shipyards launched cargo vessels so quickly that they outpaced German U-boats sinking them, Japan consoled itself that American sailors lacked the warrior's heart. But a single bomb that could destroy a city suggested something far more troubling. It suggested that American industrial and scientific capacity had reached levels that made Japanese resistance not merely difficult, but meaningless. It suggested that America had been developing weapons in secret while simultaneously fighting a two-ocean war. It suggested that everything Japan's military leadership believed about the nature of modern warfare was obsolete. Intelligence officer Colonel Hideaki Sato presented the afternoon's analysis at 1600 hours. His team had been calculating American industrial capacity since 1941, and their numbers had been consistently, terrifyingly accurate. America had produced 88,410 tanks during the war. Japan had produced 6,450. America had built 41 aircraft carriers. Japan had built 15. American shipyards had launched cargo vessels so quickly that they outpaced German U-boats, sinking them. But Sato's new calculations suggested something that fundamentally broke their understanding. If he said, voice barely above a whisper, if the Americans can destroy entire cities with single bombs, then they possess scientific capabilities that render numerical comparisons meaningless. They are not fighting the same war we are fighting. Foreign Minister Togo added what everyone was thinking but no one wanted to say. And if they have one such bomb, we must assume they have more. The Japanese understanding of American power had been shaped by a series of carefully constructed beliefs that began long before Pearl Harbor. These beliefs, documented in countless staff meetings and strategic assessments, would all collapse within days of Hiroshima. But to understand what the High Command finally realized, one must first understand what they had convinced themselves was true. In November 1941, Admiral Ianoku Yamamoto, commander of the Combined Fleet, had provided the most accurate assessment of American industrial capacity that any Japanese leader would offer during the entire war. His warning, recorded in Naval Staff minutes, was explicit. I can run wild for 6 months or a year, but I have utterly no confidence for the second or third year. Yamamoto had lived in America. He had studied at Harvard and served as a naval attaché in Washington. He had toured American factories and witnessed the industrial infrastructure firsthand. His calculations were not based on hope or nationalist fervor, but on cold mathematics. America's steel production alone exceeded Japan's total industrial output. American petroleum reserves were effectively unlimited compared to Japan's precarious dependence on imports. But Yamamoto's warnings were systematically ignored by the very staff now sitting in the underground bunker contemplating Hiroshima's destruction. The Army's strategic planning documents from 1941, recovered from archives after the war, revealed the alternative narrative that military leadership had embraced. American industrial might would be neutralized by 3 factors. First, distance. Japan's conquests would secure a defensive perimeter so vast that American logistics would collapse under its own weight. Every ship, every aircraft, every bullet would need to travel 5,000 meters across hostile ocean before reaching combat. Japan could sustain its forces from nearby conquered territories while America exhausted itself in futile supply chains. Second, morale. American society was soft, individualistic, and incapable of sustaining heavy casualties. Japanese military doctrine assumed that, after losing 30,000 to 40,000 men, American public opinion would demand peace negotiations. The Japanese soldiers' willingness to die would outlast America's willingness to fight. Third, tactical superiority. Japanese forces, through superior training, warrior spirit, and tactical innovation, would inflict casualty ratios that made American numerical advantages irrelevant. One Japanese soldier would equal 3 to 4 Americans in combat effectiveness. These assumptions had been tested and found wanting at every single engagement of the Pacific War. Yet, Japanese High Command had consistently reinterpreted defeats as validation of their theories, needing minor adjustments rather than fundamental revision. At Midway in June 1942, Japan lost 4 aircraft carriers in a single day. The official assessment blamed bad luck and tactical errors, not American cryptographic superiority or the fundamental vulnerability of Japan's carrier-focused strategy. The underlying assumption that Japanese forces could overcome numerical disadvantages remained intact. At Guadalcanal, from August 1942 to February 1943, Japanese forces discovered that Americans could sustain logistics across vast distances and could match Japanese soldiers in jungle warfare. The official assessment blamed local commanders for insufficient fighting spirit, not the impossibility of the strategic situation. The underlying assumption that American society would crack under sustained casualties remained intact. By August 1945, every major assumption had been systematically demolished by reality. Yet, senior leadership had never formally acknowledged this. General Anami's continued advocacy for fighting to the last citizen represented not stupidity, but the logical endpoint of beliefs.